Henry, good to see you.
Kevin, it's great to be back. Really nice to be in the room with you again.
Yeah. It's changed a bit. Last time we were here, we had like 2 chairs floating because I was just kind of building out the studio, but now it's pretty much complete. So lots happened since we last chatted. You launched a new book. The Way app has been building momentum, which has been great. Yeah. So I'd love to talk about all those things. And then also this morning, I was up early because of my jet lag. I did some user submitted questions as well. So I went on Instagram and we've got a few questions there. So are you game for all of that?
Let's see where we go.
Okay,
Just dive in and whatever happens.
Yeah. Sounds great. So the Way app, one of the things that we know to be true in the app industry when you look across the board on meditations apps, and I would say meditation in general, is that there is a lot of user churn. Mm-hmm. Like people have these intentions. They're like, okay, meditation sounds great. They want to sit down and really figure out if this is for them. Oftentimes, and a lot of people listening to this, I'm sure will say, hey, I tried it. It just didn't work for me. It's funny, a good colleague of mine, I was just in Hawaii at this conference and he was there too. And we sat down for meditation and he had never experienced your app before. And I played one of the meditations and he's like, that was wonderful, but my mind is just like, I don't think this is for me. Like he's having a hard time with it. Yeah. So I'm curious, like when you were developing the courseware and the curriculum for this app, like how did you think about that? Like, I mean, you have so much experience training people. Yeah. How do you think about ways in which you can engage them, meet them where they are, and keep them around for the long term? So this really is a durable habit.
Yeah. It's the perennial question, actually, of meditation. Because all the traditions that have been doing it for 2,500 or 3,000 years, they all know what the great benefits of it are. But they come from cumulative, steady, regular habit of practicing a little bit every day. Mm-hmm. That's really the key thing. So our whole project, actually, with The Way, meaning the small team that we have, led by Jack Shukman.
5 of you, right? Or something like
it's
that?
sort of 4 plus a few extras. Yeah, but really the core team is really just 4. Was to build something that could take a user on the journey of being trained in meditation. So in my mind, that meant we got to frame what the project is so people know it's actually not just about a targeted stress reduction intervention when you need it. Actually, if you learn how to meditate and if you know what the greater possibilities of it are and you're instructed, gently sort of guided, trained really in how to do it, then you will get the stress reduction benefits and the calm. But that's not the only thing you'll get. And it won't be like, hey, my dog just died, I need a meditation. Or, I'm having a stressful time at work, I need a meditation.
Right.
It'll be actually your whole system has changed. Your whole brain operating system, as it were, has changed. You got new software. Mm-hmm. So the way you handle whatever comes up will be different. In other words, we didn't want to do, I'm not going to knock them. There's some fantastic, spectacular meditation apps already out there, a lot of them. But they nearly all follow this model of having a lot of choices. Mm-hmm. That do you need it for this? Do you need it for that? Right. And, short-term courses, whatever. We wanted it to be this longer-term thing that you're really being drawn into a long path of practice that has clear and various benefits, that are going to actually function in a way that changes how you operate in the world.
Yeah.
Under whatever circumstances.
When I think about a couple hundred years ago, there was way less distraction. Yeah. We didn't have Netflix. We didn't have all these devices that are fragmenting our brains in all these weird ways. Yeah. How do you think about approaching this when someone says, I don't have time for 10 minutes?
Yes.
Yes. And then also, do they have to just believe in this bigger end goal? Is that like the main hook for it all?
Right. Okay, great. So couple of points. I would say this. First of all, the fact that this practice has been around as long as it has suggests to me that it's been needed that long, you know. So I'd say there's sort of two kinds of distraction. One is just grabbing at things that will make us feel more comfortable, you know, in the moment. And yeah, of course, nowadays it's often apps on the phone, social media, and news, and you know,
glass of wine,
and there's glass of wine as well. The fridge for some, you know, and usually it's because there's some undercurrent that we may be aware of or not, of some kind of distress or unease that we want to just not feel. So distraction is a powerful tool. It's not all bad, by the way, because sometimes distraction really does help us feel better. The problem is when it becomes the main thing. You know, we're hungry for the little dopamine hit, and you know, we're just sort of led by that. But there's also another level of almost sort of deeper distraction in a certain sense, which is where we're so caught up, not just in those immediate distractions, but in the sort of hunger and sense of need and sense of stress we might have around the larger projects in our life. And the issue there is that we don't give ourselves time to recognize the bare fact of existing at all. The very fact that we're here, being conscious in this very moment, is a miracle, actually, and it's a gift. If we start thinking about it, it's just an incomparable gift to be experiencing this existence. And of course, often it has a lot of hard things in it and has challenges, it has grievous losses, it has lots of difficulties, so that you can see the reasons why we might not want to come back to just experiencing being here. But if we can navigate the challenges to that, we can actually start to recognize that in my very being, I'm being given an infinite gift. You know, just because I'm aware right now, I have human body, I have a human mind, I have a human heart, you know, and I'm able to experience them. So here's the bigger picture of meditation is ways to come back to really receiving the gift of being alive. And it's wisdom. The wisdom of meditation is that it's counterintuitive, and it's against our typical conditioning. In Buddhism, they say you have to go against the stream, you know, because actually you are going against a sort of tide of conventional ways of being. But if you do, and you can do it just enough to get over the little resistance hump, and you can do it every day, you're starting to open up the possibility of being at peace without outward circumstances being the way you want them. That there's an actual intrinsic peace we can find. So, and there's lots of dimensions to that we could go into.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I think it's about a shift from all my well-being being contingent on outward things, to giving myself the opportunity to find a kind of underlying well-being. And I may get it in only little hits, I may get it in very small amounts, but just to start recognizing that there actually is something right here now that is already okay. And it can be called, I think, a fundamental well-being. And to get even the smallest hints of that is kind of radical, because so much of our orientation has been about, I got to make the world and the outward circumstances of my life be the way I need them if I'm going to be okay. And to start discovering we're not saying that's totally wrong, abandon that. I mean, maybe a few want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, serious sort of dedicated souls want to be an adept on the mountaintop. But for most of us, that's not necessary. All that's necessary is to open up the chance of getting a taste of a radically different kind of well-being that's not predicated on the way our lives are going. That's intrinsic. And it's such a beautiful thing to find that. And it's not that hard. That's the thing that I'm really committed to, is why I'm so keen to sort of share this with anybody interested. It's actually not that hard. It does require one difficult thing, which is establishing a habit. So hence, again, you're asking, like, you got sort of the big goals of meditation. Do they help make the habit? I'm sure they do. If you've got the frame that meditation is just going to help me with a particular stress, it may do that, and that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in a way, why should I keep going? But if you've got the frame that meditation on a regular basis can take me to a new way of experiencing my life, one where I'm less kind of beholden to how things are going in order to be okay, and one where, in fact, I find that I'm already okay. At least I get tastes of that.
Yeah.
That's a bigger picture.
Yeah, and it's a hard one for people to wrap their heads around that are so in their head all day long. Like even, I've had a decent practice now for a few years, and last night Daria had a great suggestion where she said, "Hey, let's teach the kids that phones aren't okay at the dinner table by being role models and putting them in a box 10 feet away." Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, of course I'm in on that, right? So I put it in the box 10 feet away, and then I finished dinner, and but one of the things that your app has taught me is this recognition of feelings, like just to identify and see the discomfort, and just feel it and taste that discomfort, and just to see, oh, there's that thing.
Yes.
Right. And I felt that, like, anxiety, I got to get back to this thing. I got to move. I got to do something else. And it's like, but just to recognize it was, it was normally I would just get up and go right into it. Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like recognition to me feels like a very early stage and step in this process. Would you agree with that? Just seeing what your own brain is doing?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it's not only early stage, because it doesn't matter how long you've been meditating. You'll get times when, something comes up. I want that, and the question is how much, you even put the finger on it precisely. It's like, how much can I actually recognize the experience that is going on rather than immediately react to it? So typically, there's this discomfort. I don't want discomfort. I'll have another swig of wine, or I'll go and get the phone, or I'll just something that will stop this feeling. But the meditation path is, again, it's counterintuitive. It's no, let me give a home to this feeling. Let me actually recognize how I'm doing, what's going on. And in doing that, what I'm doing actually is expanding, even just a tiny bit, my capacity for holding my own experience, including the feelings that are difficult. And what's so beautiful about that is that we're developing, we may not put it in this, might sound a bit grand, but we're sort of developing compassion. And that includes self-compassion. And that is a really, again, significant shift. Yeah. Because rather than being tugged around by our impulses,
it's like we either push it away or we shove it down.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so you're saying this is kind of like a warm hug for it.
That's correct.
And it's like, you don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm going to recognize what this feeling is and embrace it.
Exactly. And then it's as if what we feel we are shifts from being wrapped up in that difficult feeling. That's just me wanting something. That's me. I'm there wanting something. Instead, we start to identify with the part of us that is able to hold the distress, however mild it is. So then we become kind of a more expansive person. And we can feel our heart really is kind of growing. Or that's how it may feel. I always think, actually, it's not. We're only uncovering capacity we already had. It's always what I think in meditation. It can feel like we're doing something to make something develop. That's one framing of it. But another framing of it is, no, we're actually just expanding our recognition of capacities we didn't know we had, but we've had all along. I see. And I think that's really what it's really about, all the way from handling difficult emotions to, mind-blowing openings that can
Well, it
happen.
couldn't have been any other way, though, right? Because if we didn't have the capacity to have that capacity, and it never would. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's like it has to
well,
have already.
that's true. Yeah, but it's not like, say, we've got the capacity to grow, to get fitter,
Yeah.
but we do need to go to the gym. But this is slightly different. It's like, it seems like we're developing the equivalent of better musculature and all the rest of it. But actually, maybe we're just parting what obscures it that we actually already have.
And correct me if I'm getting this quote wrong, but there is a Zen saying where it's like the lifting of the veil or something like that, or the revealing. Maybe it's not Zen related, but it's this idea that like you have a veil over your face, and it's just like the clearing and lifting so that there's more clarity of what already was there.
Yes.
Versus obtaining something new.
Exactly. I think it is. And there's another phrase in Zen which is like the clouds of delusion opening. And so that's a metaphor that's quite easy to get. Like, if it's a cloudy sky, the sun is still there.
Right. Yeah, I always love that when you take a plane and it's like super cloudy and muggy out, and then you pop through those clouds. It's a beautiful day out here. I always get the window seat. I love the window seat. But okay, I think this actually transitions great into another question from our friend Tim Ferriss. I was texting with him this morning, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna be interviewing Henry. Like, is there anything you want to ask him?" And he's like, "Yes, I have some things I want to ask him." So Tim asks, if someone has 20 minutes per day, is it better to do one session or 2 10-minute sessions or another configuration? And are there certain times of day that are better than others?
Okay, I can answer that. The ideal is fairly early upon waking, soon after waking. And I would say do the 20 in one go, because every sit is actually a journey. And if you give yourself 20 minutes for that journey to unfold, you don't know quite where it might take you. And if you have 2 10 minutes, you haven't got quite as long for the whole settling process to happen.
So let me do a follow-up question to that, though.
Yeah.
Because it was interesting. You were so gracious in introducing me to your teacher who's based in Tokyo. And I was able to go out and meet with him.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he asked me was like, how many days a week do you miss sitting? Like, how many days a week do you not sit? And I was like, I got to be honest with the senior Zen master here. Okay, probably 2, And he goes, I would rather have you sit 5 minutes a day every day than to miss a day. Yes, and so I guess a follow-up question to this would be, okay, 20 minutes sounds great. Yeah. But if someone finds themselves like missing days, but they're aiming for 20 minutes, would you agree shorter duration?
Unquestionably, you cut back.
Yeah.
You cut back to a level that you can maintain every day for, say, 2 weeks. And if you've done that, then you take a small step towards your target number. You've got to find, we may have a dream dose, right? Whatever that might be. But if we're missing days, it probably means somehow it's too high for the way our life is at the moment. Yeah. So you cut back to what you can maintain daily. And once you're up and running, and by that I mean going from complete beginner to sort of novice who might have been meditating regularly for, let's say, 3 to 6 months.
Okay. So interesting. That was a good question I had in mind, because like everyone's gonna be a little bit different. Yeah. And so if someone says, I've tried this before, it didn't work for me, what would you say the commitment is to say, okay, I can't perfectly guarantee, but I can almost guarantee you'll start to feel this will get easier for you. So it's that 3 to 6 month mark. Is that kind of where it's at?
Yes, I think it probably is. Okay. And once you're sort of cruising reasonably, and there will always be times when you don't want to do it, and we just learn to ride that, just do it anyway. I always think it's like if a ship in the olden days was sailing from Britain to India or something, and it's going to go through weather, but it doesn't mean it stops the journey. Just say, I'm just going to give up. No, they just keep going. And it's the same. Weather will come through our lives and through our bodies and our minds and our hearts. We just keep going. It's so nice to have something that just keeps going regardless. There's a great value in that itself. Like, no matter what's going on in my life, I just do this thing. I just do this thing. I could have had, even when people have had a sort of massive awakening experience, some great opening, what do they do the next day? Sit. What will the teacher tell them to do the next day? Sit. when someone's going through a really, really difficult time and, real serious upheavals in life. The teacher might be compassionate, of course, around it, but still they'd say, sit. Just try to make a bit of time to sit every day, regardless. So I would say, what is really great to get to at some point, maybe 3 to 6 months actually is not long enough to be aiming for this, but twice a day of about half an hour or 20 to 30 minutes, twice a day is fantastic when you're ready for it. And you have to wait till you're ready for it. And then, maybe sometimes the evening sit's only 10 minutes.
Right.
But if you can do it morning and evening, this is the big picture.
Right.
I mean, we don't want to rush to this. But that is actually kind of the dream dose. Because then you sort of don't drop away. It's like whatever you've developed in your sit in the morning is kind of very easily topped up in the evening sit, and same thing in the morning sit. And you start to get this contiguous sense of it that can run right through your life. And that's really getting beautiful. I mean, but again, everybody should find their own.
Yeah.
I sometimes say it's like this. It's like, imagine your life is a mug of hot water and you're putting a tea bag in it. And the tea bag is meditation. And ideally, the water is flavored. All the water is flavored by the tea. And whether the tea bag needs to be in for 15 minutes in the morning and it can keep you going around the clock, or maybe it needs a bit more, you see for yourself,
Right.
am I tasting it in my day-to-day life? And if the answer is, nah, not really, it probably means, up the dosage a little bit.
I see. Yeah, and I like that in the app where you have this selection where you can say, okay, I want to do 10 minutes. And I think you added 20 and 30 now.
That's right.
It's like as you get further along, if you're like, hey, 10 minutes is feeling a little short for me, you can jump up to the 20 and then always go back if you need to as well.
That's right. Now back, actually, Kevin, I want to circle back to that question about, the guy saying, my mind is just so busy. How do I do this? My advice would be just stick with it. Do the first sit, listen to the next talk, do the next sit, do the next sit. Just keep going. Just keep going. And the hope here is that, because all the sits have some amount of guidance. And at some point, you will just find you start to listen more consistently to the guidance. You'll find it just starts to happen, that you're able to stay with what you're being asked to do, and you'll be able to do it, and you'll just kind of lock in more. It's not going to be a perfect thing. There'll be times when, you just got a lot going on and you can't seem to rein in the mind. It'll do what it does.
Yeah.
But having guidance does make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
When I started meditating, it was just like, do this thing, you're on your own, go and do it. And, my mind was all over the place.
Yeah.
And then I discovered, wow, there's this world of guided meditation, which actually wasn't part of the Zen world. Maybe a little bit here and there, some teachers would do a bit. But it was much more part of modern mindfulness, and the Vipassana world did more of it. And, I started to get exposed to that. I thought, actually, especially for beginners and novices, This is great. You can save a lot of time.
When you say save a lot of time, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, like you could be getting to discovering places of stillness and of meditative flow, which are very beautiful experiences, and just being more attentive to your immediate present moment experience and the different dimensions of it much quicker.
Yeah.
Because guidance can show us how the tools can work before we know how to operate them ourselves.
Right. It's a good point because, when we first met and we were, it was COVID time and we were chatting and you were doing these check-ins with me and it was like, I'd tell you what was going on in the practice. And I felt like it was like you just being like, let's tweak this little knob a little bit this way and a little bit this way, and it's like these little kind of guardrails for me to operate on that I would just, could be potential roadblocks and probably like slow down my progression.
That's right. And discourage you.
Yeah.
That's
right.
another thing.
That's a huge one.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple times these, depths of awakening that can happen. Can you give me an example of a student and how does that vary versus like a minor type of awakening moment versus a major moment?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I'd say there's all kinds of shifts that we can find in meditation, and they're all valuable, and they come in, I think, in the 4 main categories, and there's mindfulness. A shift in mindfulness is when, we've been kind of finding it hard to sit. We don't really know why. We just are. And then suddenly we recognize, oh my gosh, I've been thinking. There's been thought running through my mind that I hadn't actually noticed, because it can be slightly subliminal, or we just don't notice it. We're restless and why can't I sit still? And then suddenly we recognize, oh my gosh, there's been this movie playing in my mind, or there's been a sort of radio talking to me in my mind. And the first time we actually notice thinking as a process going on in our minds that we can observe, and instead of being caught up in it, that's a pretty big shift. Because suddenly it's like, wait a minute, I'm so used to being wrapped up in my thinking,
Right.
And now I'm realizing maybe I don't have to be.
Right.
Maybe I can recognize it's a thing that arises in my experience, but it's not me.
See, that's a radical thing, because like you're saying that, who's doing the recognizing then?
Yeah.
If you're recognizing and you're watching the thinker, who is that person that's watching the thinker?
Yeah, well, that's the beautiful thing. That's because you've just taken a step back closer to who you really are. There's some sort of slightly deeper level of each of us that can observe, that can be a kind of witness. And usually, very often, actually, when we find that and taste that, there is a little shiver of a good feeling, of a kind of peace, of a kind of aliveness, perhaps of a kind of wakefulness, attentiveness, and of appreciation. It's funny, they all sort of can be in there when we just get that little shift that detaches us from what we've been caught up in, and we start to recognize basically a deeper level of ourselves. So that's beautiful, and we have that capacity. And it happens in lots of ways in mindfulness. Another key one is, like you were describing, when you recognize there's this little knot or claw inside pulling me towards something. I need that now. Or gosh, I'm distressed. When we can just find there's a way we can hold that. The poet Rumi has this great poem about being a guest house. You want to become a guest house. Dear listener, be a guest house to the difficult things that come in life. Rather than closing the door, I don't want to know about you. Be a guest house. Be the host that welcomes in all the difficult things that arise. And then that sort of, then we recognize, man, I'm not just this person blindly being tugged around and pulled around in their life. I am actually a capacious being with a larger heart, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's a shift.
Yes.
And it's not yet what we call awakening,
Right.
but it is a little awakening. It's a little shift. It's an important shift. And it can actually be huge in a life.
Yeah. Little moments of space too, I think, are quite nice to have. Like, if you get into a confrontation with someone and rather than just immediately coming from this gut instinct of snapping back or whatever it may be, and just like, if there's this if you can catch the thought before it comes a full bloomed kind of back, and it's just like, it's not, that little space, it could be like, it almost feels like it's like almost infinite. And do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
What is that I'm feeling sometimes? And I don't, trust me, most times if my wife gives me a little shiver, or I give her a little shiver, we react. but like, what is that little thing that I'm talking about? Is that a thing, or am I just making that up?
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Like, there's a great Jewish philosopher, Viktor Frankl, who said, between stimulus and response, there is a gap. Everything is in that gap. Which puts it beautifully. Because that, I believe, that space is a moment when we've kind of suspended our attachment to who we ordinarily feel we are. It's a gap. And it's a beautiful thing, because we're just floating, and it is exactly as you say, it's space. And we can take that on different levels. On one level, it's just an interruption of my ordinary reactive process.
Right.
Where it's been the pause button somehow, and I would say meditation helps with this a lot. The pause button has been tapped, and everything that I'm normally just
a micro tap, not a long one, just a little doop, just enough to get you to notice it. And you're like, what was that? Like I didn't immediately engage, you know?
Exactly. And if we just look at it for 1 second of what is this gap, it's very open. It's very, very open. So we may just experience it as just a little quiet, a little pause. If we, and this can happen in meditation, we're sitting and we think we're trying to do a certain practice, and all of a sudden there's just a space with kind of nothing in it, you know? And so it can go all the way, that gap, that space can go all the way to an actual awakening. A real awakening is when we drop our sense of being who we are, who we normally think we are. It's not just dropped. We see that there's a way of being without it. There's always been here. And so we understand our sense of self then from a very different perspective, from one of a boundless openness. And our sense of self is just a thing that arises in this boundless openness. And that's very liberating.
I have no doubt. Sounds amazing. So it's impossible to describe though, right? Like for someone that's never experienced that, like it can't be put into words.
Well, I think that's true. It is. They always say, you know, it can't be expressed in words.
Yeah.
But I think lots of us, many of us, most of us have had foreshadowings of it, little glimpses that kind of echo what that's like. And again, it's these moments when we just are interrupting the normal way we exist. And we find, that thing that I normally do, I don't have to do it. You know, that's a foreshadowing of what awakening is like. I mean, Zen, for example, which puts a central sort of emphasis on awakening experiences because it knows that humans can go through them. So they're very decisive in a life. They can be. So it values them. And it also says you can't really talk about them. The way that can be spoken of is not the true way, you know, as it says in the Tao Te Ching. And it's like that. This reality that is revealed in awakening, we can't speak of it, but we can say some things about it. You often get a sense of incredible and inexplicable okayness. It can be in the midst of some real difficult situation, both personally and in the world. Suddenly there's this shift, and in a way that you could not explain to anybody, you know everything is okay. In spite of all the evidence to the contrary, you know it in your bones that it's actually all okay. But you couldn't explain why.
Is it, I'm just going to throw some stuff out there and you tell me how far off I am. So I'm watching a crazy movie. There's a conflict and battle scene on the screen. I'm not in any fear. I'm enjoying the movie. I'm caught up in the action.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Does my life at that awakening moment shift to more of of that type of view?
Yeah, that's not bad actually. It can be like that. It can be like you're in the midst of something you're wrestling with in your life, and suddenly you just drop back into a vast space, and you see yourself in your life wrestling with whatever problem is you're wrestling with from this infinite perspective.
When you say see, not visually.
Kind of. It's not exactly visual. But you're aware that, oh, there's Henry trying to get that internet problem sorted out or something that was frustrating him. But it is a little bit like you're looking at your life as if it were a movie on a screen, and you're back in the dark of the auditorium in this great space, and you're seeing the little life that Henry is trying to navigate and negotiate from that great perspective. Yeah.
Wow.
So
you're at the operating system level at that point. Like
it's fantastic because what happens then is whatever the problem is, you love it. You love the fact that this being, because you're not really you anymore. You're observing from a vastly different perspective and loving this being with their little problem.
Wow,
you
that's
feel very
amazing.
compassionate, and you do that for the whole world. And
some would say that that sounds like I hate to use the G word, but it sounds like a godlike state where it's like, do you see what I'm saying? Like you're this overarching watching, because like
I know it could sound a bit like that, but
yeah.
Well, first of all, that's not the only way awakenings show up.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's not for me to say, but I suspect that a lot of the experiences that people have had that were attributed to God and gods may have been moments of shifting, that where awareness shifts so decisively into another perspective that traditions like Buddhism and Zen call awakening, rather than attributing them to any divine or supernatural beings. It's, I don't want to diss on anybody's faith tradition, but it might be that some faith traditions have evolved out of experiences like that you don't really need the superstructure of a great, theological belief system. Possibly,
Yeah.
I don't want to say for sure, but it's possible. Certainly, I do think that our human experience has many dimensions to it, many more than we ordinarily allow ourselves to experience.
Yes.
But they're here waiting to be experienced. It's not like, again, it's not like you have to be some marvelous adept who trains this stuff up and creates it. No, each one of us already has all these multiple perspectives. We're just not used to opening them up. And we're not used to having access to them. And again, bringing it back to the way, that's one thing that I really want to be helping people. Maybe not everyone's going to experience it, but at least know that these are real possibilities, and perhaps get glimpses.
When you think about the things that we're very well familiar with today in terms of like sight, hearing, touch, smell, like all of our traditional senses, is there any, and then I promise this is the last time I'll try and figure it out because I know I can't figure it out in this podcast, but is there any hint of this being like another undiscovered sense that gets opened up in some way that is, we've always had the capacity for, but it's like just, we haven't stepped into it or really opened it up yet?
I love that. The way I would put it probably is something like, this is in all sense channels. So it's not another one. It's in all of them. And that's why actually in the Zen tradition, there are lots and lots of stories of people having awakening experiences in very different ways. There's one famous story of a guy who just saw a beautiful plum blossom, and he just saw it, and boom, he just realized that plum blossom was opening up the whole universe to him, or whatever. Again, the language falls down. And then another story is somebody just heard a pebble hit a stalk of bamboo, and the little knock, and whole universe opened up, or their sense of self and world fell away, and they were in this vast experience, and it was overwhelming and beautiful, and really, and so that was the sense of sight, the sense of hearing. There's a story of somebody where he went to a master and asked, like, what's my real nature? And the master reached out for the corner of his shirt and just pulled on it, little tug like that.
Yeah.
And he had a great awakening. So it's a sense of touch as well. And in all cases, they're kind of awakening up to the same multidimensional experience that is in all senses. And it goes on. What have we got? We just did sight, sound, touch. Oh, there's a guy who ate a piece of melon, and it was so sweet. And he was asking himself, is the sweetness in the melon, or is the sweetness in my tongue tasting the melon? And as he was pondering that question, bam, he awakened. It's both, and it's more. It's jumping to another level that includes both me and everything else. in one further dimension or something that wraps it all together into one.
It sounds so beautiful. This is why I'm so interested in always having you on the show and always wanted to explore this, because I need to keep going further down this path, because it sounds like a relief and a release to feel that. You know?
I was going to say that's another thing. You know, when we're talking about like the little shifts and releases is a great word actually that you can get in just mindfulness. You get this sense of joy or peace, a sort of quiet joy. I think it's a little bit like a kind of love, actually, which is why I call my new book Love, because it is a kind of love, I think, because you feel such relief.
It's funny that there's so many stories that I've read, and you've certainly read an order of magnitude more than I have about these awakening moments, and it seems to be followed oftentimes by a lot of tears.
Yeah, I know, because it's like, wow, I belong in a way I never knew I could, and the whole system sort of melts, and we're there's a great relaxing, everything we just let go. And it's all through the body, it's all through the heart, all through the mind. And tears just well up. And they're tears of sorrowful joy, they're tears of joyful sorrow, they're tears of relief, they're tears of just a great upwelling of happiness.
What's the relief from?
It's from the tyranny of the little self that's been dominating my life, that I've believed in all along. And demanding this and criticizing that and judging this and heaping shame on me and blaming others and all the sort of dramas and the kind of strutting, imposter, really, in a certain way that we all have, that's been running my life. And suddenly it's just gone. And the relief is incomparable. I don't think... I don't know. I mean, I haven't had, a life with astounding, sort of economic successes or something. I don't know what they're like. But I can't imagine that there could be anything greater, honestly, in a human life than this discovery. I mean, of course, falling in love, having a child, and the love of a long relationship, and that it goes through its challenges and is still going strong, and so you sort of come back to loving in new ways again and again. Those are all absolutely marvelous. But there's something about the moments where we shift our whole understanding of what it is to be alive. They're so precious, and they're available. And if only there were a surefire system, delivery method. There isn't.
Yeah.
Maybe there will be. But even now, I don't think the neuroscience has fully caught up with an actual moment of awakening. There's a friend of mine, James Austin, who's written a series of books studying this. His first one was called Zen Brain, and he's been doing it since the 80s, maybe even the 70s. He's a serious Zen practitioner himself, as well as a neuroscientist. And he thinks he's narrowed down what's going on for some kinds of awakening experience, but not for all. There's ones where just everything seems to disappear. And
when you say that everything disappears, you mean visually?
Yeah, basically everything.
So if you were sitting and this state happened to you, would you lose consciousness? Like, what happens?
Yeah, I've only had what I've had in terms of this kind of experience. And, I'm sure it's a very shallow one. It was a moment when simply the totality of my life fell away, and I know it sounds weird and it's impossible to describe. I tried in my book actually.
Yeah,
One Blade of Grass, but nobody can really convey it. But it is like everything's just gone, and somehow sort of reforms afterwards. And in the moment of that sort of annihilation or whatever it is, you can't be there knowing it. You can't be. But somehow you know when it's happened. And that was a decisive moment for me, because thereafter, what shifted in that moment, it's never fully stopped since then. And it's now 2024. It's now 16 years ago, nearly 17 years ago. And it's not like I'm living in the fullness of the power of that experience when it happened, but it's still present. And I feel this incredible gratitude. If I just remember it's here, and it immediately switches on a powerful gratitude and a kind of love, a love for this moment, that this moment is arising. Because it's very nice to be with you. And so it's a very nice circumstance anyway. But even if I was just walking down a rainy street and I was late for something, and so I could find it, love for this moment arising just as it is.
When you experience something like that in some text that talks about this idea of there's this no birth and no death.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah. I hesitate to say anything about it, but I do know that there's certainly been times when I'm not so sure that this life is exactly what we think it is. And therefore, death isn't what we think it is either. And that is it's actually a very reassuring
Do you
thing,
hesitate to talk about it because it sounds wild if you were to say it out loud, or because you don't have the words, or is it like, because this idea of no birth and no death is just wild to everyone that's listening to this, except for maybe you. So, but I'm very curious because it is mentioned so many times throughout these different traditions that when they have these deep awakening moments, that is one aspect that is seen, right?
No, it is true. It is true. I mean, here's one way we could think about it. Okay, it's like we know that all the experience we have, to be aware of it, there has to be awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now, I can see the table, I can see your eyes, and we're chatting.
You got me so far. I'm with you.
So there is awareness.
Yes.
Now, what if that awareness actually somehow exists independently of content? In other words, right now, we're looking at each other, but actually awareness is present right now wrapping around the experience. So this experience of conversing with one another, I know I'm talking a lot, actually. It's a bit one-sided, I'm sorry.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting.
But this experience is actually arising within a context of awareness. So then the question, if we can get some sense of that as a possibility,
okay.
So then the question is, well, what characteristics does this awareness itself have? So one way to say, well, it can show visuals, it can show auditory stuff, because we can hear, we can see, we can feel, sense pants and seat and so on. We can sense all of this stuff.
But do you believe that you are part of that global awareness and not just the awareness here?
That's right. That's right. That's right. You can migrate your sense of who you are.
Wow.
Because you actually are really that great awareness. So let me it's coming back to the birth and death thing. Therefore, in that awareness, we have to get to know it a bit. But if we investigate it, we find that it really it has the capacity to do lots of things, but in itself, it has no characteristics. And when we really sort of release our hold on here and transfer to being absorbed into the awareness, if we then ask a question like, well, what's time? It's very clear time belongs to that thing out there, this sort of play we're having of being people, right? It doesn't belong to that awareness. It just doesn't do time. It can do time in the play, on stage, like a stage play, but it doesn't do time. And when we really are in there, clearly, there is no time.
So let me ask you a question, though, real quick there. How do you know you're in that thing if there is no time? Because time is just a string together set of awareness.
Yeah, but time is actually an idea. Time is an idea that we have. We create the idea of time. If we're really right here now, just being here now, time's not here. Time is an idea we pick up.
That's a good point.
And
Because there's no time for this glass right now.
that's right. It's just being the glass.
It's just being the glass.
Yeah. And actually, there's no time for this body, even though it's aging.
But this glass doesn't have awareness though.
Yeah, but awareness is not the same as a
external.
concept. Exactly.
So it's watching. It can construct the glass and watch the glass, but it is not the glass.
Exactly. And so the time is a construction that is conceptual. It has to be thought,
Right.
right? So the thought arises within a greater context of awareness. In terms of actual experience, there's some traditions that say it's all about finding that awareness. Great, good for them. But Zen is a little bit, it includes that, but Zen doesn't restrict it to only awareness. It thinks that we can have experiences where actually we're just absorbed into the fabric of everything and there isn't really awareness.
That's one step further than awareness.
I don't know, it's different. I think it's different dimensions. I wouldn't like to say further or not. I wouldn't like to say. But I'm sure that there are experiences where there isn't awareness. And because I think that was, Zen talks about that. Various masters have been through that, and it's a thing that's acknowledged. It's not where you want to end up, but you can go through it, And
what do you say? It's not where you want to end up.
well, because in Zen, the idea isn't to end up in some totally empty, barren place. The idea is to go through these experiences and then be living your ordinary life with a richer awareness and a more full awareness and more compassion and more gratitude, more positive pro-social emotions.
Right.
So it's not about checking out and being in a place of vast empty bliss or something. We kind of hope you might get a glimpse of that. But in order to come back and live differently.
Yeah. So bringing it back into every ordinary life.
Everyday life.
Yeah. One kind of follow-up question here is pertaining to practice, which is there's also this kind of elusiveness of awakening where it's like the more you try to obtain it, the more you're pointed in the wrong direction.
Yes,
like
that's right.
How would you frame that? And it's such a weird thing to think about because like everything that we do in the physical world is done through effort to obtain something, right? And so it's like you almost have to think about this state in a sense of just releasing that desire of obtainment.
I know.
And that's when the magic happens?
It can be. There's no guarantees, but it can be.
Can you explain that though? Like,
because here's how it works. It's like awakening is not another view. It's not like there's mountains, there's the river, there's the hills, there's the forest, and there's awakening. No. In looking at the mountains, awakening is already here. In looking at the river, awakening is already here. Right now, you are the awakened one. You already are. So you can't find it because it's you already. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
It's actually not, it's not about this is why talking about it as an experience in a way is okay and as a way is misleading because it suggests that it's having another kind of experience. It's not, it applies to all experience. It's so because it's you. It's just like I was saying earlier about sort of coming back to a deeper self. Once we've initiated that process, we can be on track to do it more and more and more, coming back deeper and deeper, clearer and clearer, until we really find this self we've always been that is not the same as the self we think we are.
If I was going down that path of saying I want to be awakened, I'm creating an object out of something.
That's exactly right.
Versus just it's already here.
Yes.
And if I'm creating an object of something, it's not that awakening's running away from me. It's just that I'm looking at something that isn't even what it is. Like it's like
exactly.
I'm like creating a structure out of it when it's not structured at all.
That's right. And I mean, imagine, if you think of it, I want to get that glass.
Right.
But actually that glass isn't what you want to get with awakening.
Right.
What you want to get with awakening is you yourself. So however you're reaching for it, you can't be reaching for it because it's already what you are. So Henry, that's no help at all because I'm not experiencing it. What do I? So the path in practice is really a path of coming back more and more to just being, to being more and more okay, just being, meaning including the things we find difficult. We can just be with them. And we're developing this capacity. This is why it all builds up and helps, is to be developing the capacity to be with what we find hard, to know these impulses that we have, that, impulses for distraction and suppression and, and reaching for stuff and avoiding stuff, pushing stuff away. All of that to be getting to know that in a space that's ours, are just being aware. We're coming home more and more to just being. And the more we're able to just be, sooner or later, in that condition of just being, we might suddenly get a hit that, oh my gosh, I've just never been what I thought I was.
Right. So it's not even actually like you're coming back to who you are, because you is just a construct as well.
Well, that's true, but in a certain way you are, because
rather than global you,
yeah,
not a Kevin you.
Exactly. Well, even maybe what Kevin really is this global you. It's not what he'd thought. And Henry likewise thinks often he's this guy who's trying to do this and trying to not do that and so on. And actually all along, oh my gosh, what that version of Henry has been, it's been made of the real Henry and the real Kevin, which is just very different.
And do you see that as like when you say the real Henry and the real Kevin, do you see that as two separate individuals? Or is there such a thing as Henry and Kevin?
Yeah. Well, it's the answer that depends.
You're like, how deep do you want to go?
Yeah. And there are different sort of levels. Honestly, there is a level on which there's no Kevin and no Henry. There really is.
What would Zen call that?
A true person of no rank, true self. True self.
Love that true person of no rank.
Yeah, you're just...
it's such a beautiful saying.
Isn't it?
A person of no rank.
That's Rinzai, Lin Chi,
yes,
great Chinese master. Zen sometimes does use a word, the true self. True self.
Person of no rank feels so good, though. Why does that feel so good?
Because we're so habituated to
we want to climb,
ranking,
we want to rank everything.
Status,
yes.
Hierarchy, but just better, worse.
I actually think I own personofnorank.com or something like that. I own something like that.
Really?
Yeah, because I read it somewhere. And I buy these domains because I'm trying to rank things and buy the unrankable thing as a holdable object. Okay.
That's so cool.
I have no rank. Personal rank. I'll tell you later. It's ridiculous.
Hey, so funny that you bring up the true person of no rank, because we got a course starting on November 3rd on it. And the true person of no rank has come down actually as a koan in Zen. And the full story, I don't know if you know it, is Rinzai, this great Zen master, 9th century, or Lin Chi.
Who started the Rinzai sect, which is one of the two major big sects.
One of the two great schools of Zen, Soto and Rinzai. He said, don't you know that there is a true person, a true you, a person of no rank, constantly going in and out of the portals of your head. What is this true person of no rank? Okay, so
when was that said?
He died in 866, so maybe 840, 850.
This is just with what we know now with quantum mechanics and everything that's going on with string theory and everything. It's do you kind of does that blow your mind when you read some of these articles the scientists are publishing and you're like, oh, this maps to
it totally does. I think I can't explain why, but I think in Zen and other practices, you do taste these things that quantum physics is finding.
Yes.
And I can't defend this because I've got no evidence at all, but I suspect that our whole idea of distance, interplanetary travel, into solar travel, whatever, is just so daunting because we think distances are so huge. But what if, really, in awakening experiences, we were talking about time disappearing. Sometimes it depends on the experience. So does space. You can.
Have you experienced that? Space?
I have. I mean, God, I'm going to sound so weird, but the
No, I wanna
very
hear it.
first experience I had actually was like, I knew that I was made of the universe. I wasn't this separate being. I was just, what I really was the universe. And the whole, I mean, I don't mean that in some grandiose way. It's actually the opposite. There's not me. There's just the universe, which is choosing to be me as it's choosing to be each of us. And when we drop into it on that level, whatever that level is, there is no space. So I suddenly felt as if my nose was touching the beginning of time and my fingertips were touching the end of the universe.
So when you say that sounds amazing. Sounds like you're on a crazy trip on some psychedelic.
No psychedelics at all.
Yeah.
This is.
If there's no space, is there no emptiness in that state?
See, emptiness is a misleading term because sometimes we can have an experience where it's a great empty space, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes emptiness actually is just nothing. It's more like nothing.
Like
no space.
Nil, like a lack of,
yes,
like
a zero, an absolute zero. And I mean,
is that mu?
It is.
Interesting. That's a koan.
And remember,
people can look up that.
But Kevin, remember, it's right here now.
Right.
So even right now, if we just go to Rinzai again, your sense gates, you're seeing, you're hearing, smelling, tasting, and words, this is what he means by the portals of your head, as sense gates, basically. There's this true person without status coming and going through your senses, actually being your senses. So your very sense of sight, and you're receiving the very sights that you're seeing. Your hearing of sounds. They are the true person without rank. They're the true you, where there's no ranking, there's no status, there's no better and worse, there's no good and bad, there's no truer and less true. In the true person, it's all real and true, And it's actually your own experience is that discovery of sort of the real you. It's not elsewhere. It's in your very experience now. And it is also, you just brought up mu, it's also this cardinal koan, mu, where it's just a little word that means not. It's right here. It's this. It's this. There's a way that all this is manifesting just as it is. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's all kind of an expression of something else that's here. Not. That it's all happening. It's all happening. But in a certain way, it also kind of isn't. Both is and isn't. Kind of. Okay.
I need to jump on the cushion after this. This is like, I need to get back at it. Man, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Henry. That's certainly aspirational for me to get back on the cushion.
I'm sorry, it's so weird.
No, it's not weird. What the weird thing is, I'm starting to like not get it, but like it's so funny. It's like if you pick up Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and you read it the first time, you're like, what the hell are they talking about? What is this Suzuki talking about? And then a decade later, you keep reading it, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm seeing that slightly differently now.
Yes.
And I feel like, is that a common thing with practitioners?
Yes,
where like all of a sudden you're like, that sentence doesn't mean the same to me than it did 2 years ago.
That's right, because you're on the train.
Right.
You're on the train, and the landscape and the perspective on the landscape is changing.
Right.
Therefore, you read a line you might not even have noticed.
Right.
2 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I can tell people is that, and this is from someone that has zero awakening, but I will say in my practice, like the things that you're saying now make a lot more sense to me than if I had just heard it for the first time and had never had a practice.
Right.
Which is quite nice to know. This isn't always going to sound like gibberish to everyone if they pick up and get a practice.
Exactly. I mean, my whole feeling today is that we don't want to only be pursuing awakening. because there are so many great benefits that come from meditating. And so the way is a map and a path that takes you through, yes, possibilities of awakening, little prompts and questions that might help get a glimpse, but also all these other things, really helping us get grounded in our mindfulness so that we can get more self-compassion and compassion for others, helping us feel more connected, which is a huge terrain, as meditation is actually not a solitary pursuit. It's very much about connecting with others, connecting with the world, connecting with our experience here and now. So that's critical as well. And there's getting into flow states, absorption states, samadhi as it's called, where you just, you kind of cast loose a little bit and you feel a great ease and a great peace and effortlessness and a richness and a fulfillment. That's all tremendously valuable, even though it's not yet this kind of shift into all this weird shit that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I've had this practice with you where I'm working on a koan, I'm sitting, I'm not using headphones, I'm not using guided, and I'm just sitting and I'm working on it. And I have a very structured practice on that front. And then you came out with the app and I started using it and in conjunction with my sitting.
Yeah.
And I found out that one of the things I loved about it was that you have these different mountains, these different retreats that you go through. Yeah. And it was rounding out my knowledge in so many other ways, which I think for me personally, just speaking from myself, is like it created a stronger foundation of knowledge. And I think with that stronger foundation, no matter which way you decide to take it, you'll be better off because of that.
That is exactly my hope. That I think it's much more wholesome.
Yeah.
To have a well-rounded practice, because it helps more of us. We're multidimensional creatures.
Yes.
And if we put all our eggs in one basket, other things are going to suffer. And there is a phenomenon they call spiritual bypassing, where, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it, where we're so focused on spiritual kind of attainment of some kind, which we already know is a bad idea anyway, because it won't help you get it. But anyway, we're focused on our practice, and we're looking to get all our well-being out of our practice. And lo and behold, my wife's not so happy with me. But darling, I'm doing all this great practice. I'm becoming a more compassionate and wholesome. It doesn't matter that I'm ignoring you and going off to do these retreats, because I'm actually working on being. It does matter, and actually, man, I could do a bit of connecting, and so having the whole person be on board with the practice is just much, much healthier.
That's one thing that I like about the Way app is it is not just marching towards enlightenment and, enlightenment or bust, as we've said a couple times laughing. It is this kind of, it feels more multimodal kind of, different types of experiences on each one of these kind of mountaintops that you go through and traverse through, which is really cool. And I like that you've always been an advocate for, traditional therapy. You talked about internal family systems one time, which I tried out, which was fantastic.
Isn't it great? Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, we'll get into a question about that in a second. Actually, there's a question just about that. But
so I just want to say one last thing.
Please.
At the same time as all we've just been saying, I think it's really valuable to talk about awakening so people know it's a real possibility and it is part of the picture. Because people sometimes have experiences of it, but without any context, they've no idea what just happened. I want to be part of the, could you call it education, or part of the movement that is letting more people know that it is a human capacity, awakening, and that it does have a name and it's a real thing, because it can be so disorienting. So I just wanted to state that. It's important, I think, that it be recognized and acknowledged as well.
It is very important, because there is, like, for example, you said this you were very young when you had this experience, and you were like, what the hell was that? And Eckhart Tolle is another one where he was near suicidal, had this amazing awakening opening moment. And he's famous for saying that he just sat on park benches in the kind of the state of awe for weeks and months at a time, not knowing what had happened to him, so it's like, it can pop like that randomly, which is crazy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool. A couple questions. Last one Tim wanted me to ask you is caffeine helpful or hurtful prior to sitting?
Look, there's a deep relationship between tea and meditation. I think both in India and in China and in Japan, and tea is caffeinated. There's a reason for it. I think if you can have And if you just have straight coffee, I think have what you want.
Yeah.
There's one Zen master, I never sat with him, but I know that his students at one point were they were all sort of purists who said, we shouldn't have coffee on retreats, on deep Zen sessions. They're called session, intensive meditation.
I have broken
retreats.
that rule at your Zendo. I apologize.
No, I'm glad you did. Because this guy was called Pat Hawk Roshi, actually. He died a few years ago. And he said, when they were asking him, we want to abolish coffee at retreats, he said, no coffee, no Pat. In other words, he wouldn't show up for the retreat if they didn't have coffee.
Wow.
They gotta have coffee.
That's crazy.
I think whatever, experiment.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason that tea has been part of it.
Do you know the Japanese story or origins of tea? Did you ever?
Well, I only know that I know the Chinese with Bodhidharma.
So there's two. There's probably multiple, but the founding stories of tea. It's a fun little anecdote. So Shenong, who I have tattooed here, which is the Chinese herbalist they think that was the real one that discovered it. The first one to actually write it down.
Right.
And that was like pretty straightforward. He found some leaves, he put it in some boiling water and like felt something, was like, this is kind of awesome. Right. And then the Japanese are so cool where they have this story where like their founding, father of tea was this man who was having trouble meditating. And so do you know what I'm about to say?
No.
And so he cut off his eyelids to keep his eyes open so he wouldn't fall asleep. And he threw his eyelids on the ground and it grew tea plants.
Yes. But that's the story of Bodhidharma.
Oh, it's not the eyelids, is it?
It is.
It is?
Yeah. He's in his cave sitting for 9 years China.
Why did they say that was a Japanese thing as well? Maybe that was...
Well, that would be because it's part of the Zen...
Is it come through Zen?
Dharma,
Interesting.
Dharma,
I did not know that. Okay, so now that's fascinating. So
he came from India to China, bringing Zen with him, apparently, met an emperor of the southern kingdom of China, and who kind of had a sort of Zen interview with him, didn't understand what Bodhidharma was saying at all. And Bodhidharma left, crossed the Yangtze River on a single blade of grass, and then went off to Shaolin and sat in a cave for 9 years. And while he was sitting there, he was getting sleepy, so he cut off his eyelids.
Right.
Exactly. Threw them on the ground, tea.
I love those stories because they're just so entertaining when you hear those fables around this stuff.
Well, hey, do you know the story of when he died?
No.
It's pretty amazing. When Bodhidharma died, they put him in a cave and rolled a big stone into the mouth of the cave, which might sound familiar.
Yeah.
Right. So 3 days later, there's an official who's been away somewhere in the far west. He's walking back to the town where Bodhidharma was living and just died. And he meets Bodhidharma on the road carrying a sandal. And he says, hey, Bodhidharma, where are you going? What's happening? And Bodhidharma said, I'm going home. And so it's had a little exchange, and the guy carries on, gets to the town, says, I heard Bodhidharma left. I said, no, Bodhidharma's here. He just died 3 or 4 days ago. He said, no, he didn't. I just met him on the road. So they go to the cave and roll the stone out of the mouth. Sure enough, Bodhidharma's not there, but he left one sandal behind.
That's amazing.
Zen detail.
So many resurrections with the stone going away.
Isn't it incredible?
Yeah. All right. So a couple quick questions. These came in from folks that were emailing in. When being asked what is the nature of the clock or some other type of traditional koan, do you think there is value in that kind of approach to Zen in modern society? Are there any similar practices that are equivalent to koans but based on modern approaches?
Yeah, look, what I would say is that koans actually are about our modern life. It's true that they'll use old-fashioned terminology and things that we don't have. Like there's one koan where a master hits someone with a thing called a chin rest. So nobody knows what a chin rest is.
Right.
It's actually when monks were meditating a lot, and they were going to even do multiple days on end meditating, they would have a board with a kind of support on the end and rest it under their chin while sitting so that they could actually sleep while sitting. So who knows what, nobody would, you never see that in modern life.
Right.
So yeah, you could change that to a cushion or something instead of a chin rest. And it would make no difference. Because the koans aren't, I hope I'm answering this question correctly, but it's right that there are things that come from another time and place, and they could actually, really, they could just as well be contemporary things. Because the point is, again, that they're attempting to draw us back into the reality out of which all objects arise. So, and the reality that all our experience is made of. So whether it's a weird Chinese implement called a chin rest, or whether it's a glass today, it's actually the koan's job is exactly the same. It's inviting us to realize that there is a reality, there's a level of experience in which, and it's here right now, this glass and the mind that's seeing the glass and the arm and hand that are holding the glass, they're all made of that same awareness, reality, experience. They're all expressions of it, of one level of reality. They're all coming out of it. They're all made of it. So, and from that point of view, they're just as relevant today as 2,000 years ago. They must be.
Yeah.
You know, because they're actually about something that's sort of, I always feel it's like it's just behind our ordinary experience. And actually, there is a Zen phrase, take the backward step that shines the light inward. Like withdraw this little bit, and then you get illuminated, and you see what all this is in a different way.
Excellent. Couple more questions for you.
Sure.
All right. Next one here from Cody. Hi, Henry. Big fan of your Mountain Cloud Zendo and your meditation at the Way. I'm having a great time going through all the trails. Questions on the differences between the various meditation-based religions, Theravada, Buddhism, Mahayana, I always get that one hard to pronounce, Hindu and Zen, all can claim meditation masters that have taken the practice almost as far as it can go, but come to different conclusions on past lives and death, conclusions I would imagine that come from learnings directly from meditation. Why do you think that is? So these different teachers having slightly different takes, but yet are going very deep and are having these awakening moments. Why are they having different conclusions?
Yeah. So let me just sort of throw that in a little into some perspective, particularly in the Hindu world and the Theravada world. There's a lot of emphasis on reincarnation, or at least it's there. Whereas you can find it in Mahayana as well, but you can also find Mahayana Buddhism that doesn't speak about it. And Zen also does not speak about it. It just doesn't go there. And my friend Stephen Batchelor, who's a fantastic Buddhist practitioner and author, he's written quite a lot about Theravada Buddhism mostly, somewhat about Zen as well. He's a really interesting guy. He wrote a great book called Buddhism Without Beliefs. And his argument, and take this or leave this, but he believes that the cultural context in which Buddhism emerged already had reincarnationism as a sort of standard part of their worldview. Therefore, early Buddhism just adopted that and slightly repurposed it for Buddhism, but not much. I mean, it's basically the same system. And by the way, just a footnote, there are different kinds of reincarnationist belief. And this one, the one that we're familiar with, is called tripartite because it has three threads to it. One is that the reincarnations are a kind of, they have a potential sort of moral hierarchy. You can get sort of better and better births. And there's a kind of final outcome you hope for, which is release from being born again. And in some traditions, that's what nirvana means. You're not going to get born again. And I think another element in that system is that you can sort of go up and down the hierarchy depending on how you behave and live. But I think Zen's just not interested. So let's just understand what this moment is, shall we? Or let's understand this life. There's enough to be getting on with right here in this life. And actually, there's enough to be getting on with right here in this very moment. All answers, in a sense, are only in one place, right here, And so, why would we be speculating about, other worlds that we're born into and other? And then again, I find this always a bit perplexing. I mean, it is a path of untangling the the tangled knot of self and finding that it was just a tangle. And when it's untangled, there isn't something there. So what is it that would go on to another life? You know, so one of the core sort of insights of Buddhism is no self. That it's a bit like complex systems, that systems have their own sort of dynamic they develop, and that's what's happening here. Multiple systems are being this life, but there isn't one hardcore self that can be pinpointed as this is me. That's actually, in a way, sort of core of the practice. So what on earth would it be that theoretically might go into another life? It doesn't, I've never really quite understood that.
What do you think is, like, if you have these different sects that all have their own, you know, enlightened masters and that have slightly different viewpoints? Is that just, you know, the thinking mind kind of engaging? And because, like, in some sense, like, there's no such thing as like a perfect being, right? So it's like we're never going to have the perfect, clear, like, picture in this entity, right? Do you believe that's kind of what's going on here? And why we have slightly different takes on different things is it's a little bit of, like, to your point about kind of playing in some of the culture aspects and rolling those into what your beliefs are, or, you know, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just different. You know?
Exactly. I don't think it's good or bad, but I think it probably is cultural context. If I'd been brought up, you know, in a very theistic context, and I'd had that experience that I had when I was 19, when I had a first awakening that we just referenced a little bit a while ago, might I have thought I'd met God? I suppose I might have, and I might have been very convinced of that. Like, wow, now I had real proof God exists. But I was brought up without a belief of that kind.
Yeah,
so I just didn't go there.
It's kind of like the book, the Cloud of Unknowing, right?
Yeah, well, that's a deep book. Gosh, I love that.
But it's very much like, so we don't know who wrote it. Is that correct?
Correct, anonymous author.
Anonymous author, but it feels like it was potentially a Catholic monk, or
it was was it 14th century, I think, English.
Yeah.
And it was Catholicism was the only available option back in those days in Northern Europe and Western Europe. So it would have been a Catholic monk.
Do you want to explain that book real quick? Because this is a great example of somebody that had an awakening type.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Can you tell people?
He was very, very deep. I mean, actually, do we know that it was a guy? I don't know if we know that. The author had clearly gone very deep in this contemplative, meditative journey, and had come to the conclusion that God was sort of absolutely unknowable. So what they meant when they said the word God was not like, you know, our notions of Yahweh, the ruler in the sky, and, you know, who's a sort of tribal God of Israel, is smite mine enemies, and, you know, all that. Nothing like that at all. Rather, it was a place of thorough unknowing, of just not knowing. And you could get deeper and deeper into that not knowing until there was kind of nothing there. So it's very like Buddhist awakening, or Zen awakening, where you can get to the state where there's less and less and less content until there's no content. And it's just a vast, but you can't even say it's vast, actually. It's a dimensionless, sizeless, spaceless, timeless.
Right.
And somehow it's part of our makeup. So we humans can actually experience it. And more than that, in a certain way, we can't not. I mean, we can not experience it, but we are always made of it.
Yeah. And what's fascinating about this particular book is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt as though, you know, you have Buddhism over here, and this seemed to be more on the kind of like maybe potentially Catholic side of the house. And we know there's been these awakening type moments and very deep prayer states, things of that nature. So it's like, in some sense, there's multiple mountaintops here to be discovered, and it doesn't have to be like there. People can get to the same more or less arena
Yes.
through different modalities and traditions. Like,
Absolutely. In fact, in my new book, Original Love, I talk about going to Mount Athos, which is this holy mountain of the Greek Orthodox Church, and meeting an abbot there who was describing the time when, in his language, he saw the face of God. And it was a moment when he was riding the ferry back to the peninsula of Mount Athos from the local town in the evening, and he saw the holy mountain, and it just dissolved into nothing. And him too. It was a classic Zen awakening, but in his language, it was seeing the face of God. And then he went on beyond that in his training to learn to see the face of God in everything. And that's kind of course, different language, but very similar kind of training to find the timeless in every moment, to find the marvel of things arising in every moment, and to taste this a certain way, sort of, I want to say a vastness that's present. It's also sizeless though, so it's not the right language, and it's an emptiness and it's a fullness at the same time, and it's right here. It's really right here. But once again, I don't want to give the impression that this app is just solely laser focused on awakening. No, it's part of our human makeup. And the whole journey of meditation is kind of developing in all these different dimensions that help us be human and help us be ourselves more fully and amply, and in turn, of course, be more helpful in the world and serve our fellow creatures, our fellow beings.
It's a great point, right? Because in some sense, like, there's this idea that, if you have these states of bliss and everything falls away and everything is empty, and you might lose sight of what matters here and now with everyday world affairs, right?
Yes, totally.
And so there's like some sense of like, well, actually, this will probably sharpen your compassion and make you more effective in some ways in this life.
Exactly. And I always say, when people think, aren't you checking out? Because sometimes a criticism that is sometimes made of spiritual practitioners is they get attached to, if they've had some great awakening, they sort of get attached to it. Can happen. But my view is like, if you really see through, there's nothing to get attached to. And you also know that what you've realized is present everywhere. So there's absolutely no need to be, I want to be in that checked out spiritual state. Not at all. It should knock that away completely. A really deep experience should just do away with that. Or even not so deep experience. I don't know, but we can have experiences that knock that away, because we know that it is everywhere and it cannot but be everywhere. So there's no need to be trying to cling to it. And you see what I mean? It's like, you don't have to stay in some special state. It's just all this, and you're in the thick of it all the time. So no need to be trying to have a certain kind of experience. We're in the thick of it.
Yes.
Right? But the difference is, when we've been through it, is that we're less attached to the little dictator, and we're more able to. I'm always hesitant to. I don't like doing down the sense of self, actually, although it might sound like I have, because I think it just needs to be loved, and it actually, by loving ourself, we actually get closer to letting go of self. Weirdly. But we do. I'm sure that's true. It's by, if we think we don't want it, we want to get rid of it. That's what I've heard people talking about, spiritual teachers,
right.
Sort of release from yourself or something.
Yeah, so it's more of embracing of what is right now.
Yeah. Because actually, if we're trying to sort of get rid of it, that's the self doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's actually the self saying, I don't want the self.
Right.
The self does aversion.
Like, who's saying that you want to get rid of it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Amazing. Henry, real quick to wrap up, obviously the wayapp.com is fantastic. There's a free trial. You got to try it out. You have these great sits combined with some great talks on video as well, which is fun. iOS and Android, which is great. And then also your new book. We didn't go deep on the new book, but can you give me like the 30-second kind of version of? It's probably not long enough to to talk to the book. But why did you write this book? Why now? And what was what's behind it?
Oh man, I think it's so needed. A clear map of the possibilities of meditation. That, like we've been saying, mindfulness, connection, flow, and awakening. And they're not all the same. And they're all immensely valuable. And the healthiest practice has all of them. Mm-hmm. When we get a hint of awakening, a glimpse of awakening, this current of love surges up because we just feel such love for everything. It's a common thing. In Zen, they talk about original nature and original face, seeing your original face that you've had since before you were born. That's a terminology for having an awakening experience. And I just said to myself, love's always there. Is original love. And it's the same lovingness that helps us soften in our emotional lives through mindfulness, that helps us connect with others more and help others more. And I say that when we have flow states and absorption states in meditation, it's like falling in love with this moment. So there's sort of thread of love through it all, but it's not the usual meanings of love really. It's this unconditional well-being, basically.
Fantastic.
So that's it in a nutshell.
And it's on. I listened to it on Audible, and you read it yourself, which is awesome as well. So you can check that out. Original Love, Audible or Amazon, and in your website as well, right? Just
HenryShukman.com has some stuff on it.
Yeah, because you're doing retreats and all kinds of stuff, and more. Also, you're doing some more Zoom big group calls. I know with the app, and there's a lot of fun stuff to dig into here. So, Henry, thanks for being on the show.
Kevin, thanks so much for everything.
That was awesome.
Yeah.